Hello everyone! Today we're going to continue the seventh most important thing, read aloud. We're going to continue chapter 24 and I would like you to pause this video and go grab a paper and pencil if you still haven't done that, because I'm going to ask you some questions. I would like you to write down the answers, okay? Alright, so last time we were talking, Arthur had made friends with that boy that he saved from the trash can. So chapter 24. They kept eating lunch together. Arthur wasn't sure why. Partly he didn't want to hurt Squeak's feelings, and partly he felt like it might be bad luck to stop. He couldn't explain why Squeak and the foil were important, but he felt that somehow they were. If nothing else, Squeak's lunch saved him a lot of work on Saturdays. He didn't have to scrounge around in people's garbage cans looking for foil anymore. One lunch period, he wrote out the list of the seven most important things, while Squeak was finishing his usual foil-wrapped lineup of sandwich, apple, and cookies. If anybody could figure out what Mr. Hampton's list meant, Arthur thought, it would be Squeak, who was abnormally smart about everything. He took courses like Algebra 1 and chemistry that Arthur didn't even know 7th graders could take. Here, I've got something for you to look at, Arthur said, passing the sheet of notebook paper across the table. What do you think the things on this list mean? Squeak straightened his glasses and studied the page. You mean, what do they have in common? Sure, yeah. Do you want to know the spelling error you made too? Arthur scolded. No. Okay, just asking, Squeak answered quickly. I wasn't sure if it was an assignment for class or not. He tilted his head from one side to the other, looking at the list silently. Then turned the paper upside down, and then right side up again. Is this a trick question? He asked finally. No? Squeak chewed his lip and squinted at the paper. I can see only a couple of things they have in common. First, from a scientific standpoint, they're all solids. Arthur gave a sarcastic snort. So are your cookies and this table. He glanced towards the administrators standing nearby, and Vice's brain. You didn't ask me about Vice's brain, Squeak retorted. You asked me about your list. After looking at the paper for a long time again, he continued. Okay, this one is kind of vague. Cardboard boxes, coffee cans, bottles, foil. They all hold nothing. Mirrors? Your reflection. Oh yeah, said Arthur, thinking that was kind of a stretch. Third, everything except cardboard and wood is shiny or reflective. Great. Squeak was one of the smartest kids in the school, and that's the best he could come up with? He was collecting shiny, solid stuff that held things. So what? What's the list from? Squeak asked curiously. Arthur took one of Squeak's vanilla cream cookies because he never ate all of them. They're from my probation. Squeak looked confused. Foil and cardboard are your probation? Yep, Arthur said, shoving the cookie into his mouth. And I collect them for the guy I threw the brick at. Then he glanced uneasily at Squeak, wondering if maybe he didn't know the whole story, although that seemed impossible. Everybody at Bird Junior High knew the whole story. You know I threw a brick at a guy, right? Looking uncomfortable, Squeak nodded. Yes, I heard that was what you did. Well, Arthur continued, he was a homeless guy who used to go around my neighborhood collecting junk. Everybody called him the junk man. For my probation, I work for him every Saturday, collecting stuff off his list. And that's why you take the foil from my lunch? Squeak interrupted. Exactly. Does the list ever change? Arthur shook his head. Nope. It's always the same things. You can't substitute anything else. If you leave him a lamp instead of a light bulb, he flips out. He collects wings too, he added, thinking of his dad's hat. And I used to see him picking up wine bottles and other junk when I was a kid. Squeak tilted his head, studying the list again. Is it possible he uses them for building or making something? Or inventing something? Old coffee cans and empty wine bottles? I don't know. Squeak folded up the list and passed it back to Arthur. Of course, there is always the possibility he could be an enigma, he added. Enigma? Someone who doesn't make sense. Maybe you are collecting an enigmatic list for an enigmatic person. Squeak replied in the superior tone that really ticked Arthur off sometimes. So the kid was a genius. Who cared? He was about to tell Squeak to stop being a jerk when the bell rang. I'll keep thinking, Squeak said as he scooped up his lunch garbage. Maybe I'll come up with something. Don't bother, Arthur called over his shoulder as he took off. So now I would like you to pause this video and write down what were the answers that Squeak gave Arthur about the list, what his thoughts are on what the list is about, okay, and why. Now we're going to move on to chapter 25. And then, as if to prove Arthur is wrong, the list changed. It was the first Saturday in February, a sunny, almost warm day. In a lot of places, you could spot some patches of almost green grass showing. When Arthur arrived at Hampton's garage, he expected to find the same cardboard note with the same list. It was his 7th Saturday of work, and nothing had changed so far. In fact, he almost didn't bother to read what was written on the sign attached to the grocery cart. Only a Monroe wouldn't have the 7 most important things memorized by now. Fortunately, he glanced at the sign and noticed that it was new, and it had only one item listed this time. In the same square printing as the other signs, it said, Arthur, find throne chair. What? Arthur thought, rereading the note. Where in the world did Mr. Hampton think he would find a throne in this rundown neighborhood? So now I would like you to pause this video and write down what was written in this note, what was this new thing, and why you think he asked that. He looked around at the leaning telephone poles, the rusted chain link fences, the crooked porches. Most of the houses didn't even have a decent chair on the front porch, let alone a throne. Or was it a misspelling? Did he actually mean a thrown out chair, maybe? What seemed more likely, especially since Mr. Hampton still misspelled Arthur's name on every sign. Surprisingly enough, chairs weren't that hard to find in the trash on Saturdays. People seemed to get rid of chairs a lot. Most weekends, you could usually find a couple of saggy sofas waiting by the curb, too. At least, Mr. Hampton hadn't asked him to get a sofa. Arthur grinned. That would have been a real treat to get in the grocery cart. It didn't take long for him to spot the first possible chair candidate, a few houses away from the garage. It was a metal desk chair with one broken armrest and rusted legs. Not great, but he thought it might work for if he got desperate. On the next street, he found a nice blue plaid armchair. It had some puffs of loose stuffing come out of its cushions, but the rest of it seemed to be in good shape. The main problem for Arthur was how to get the big chair into the cart without killing himself. After trying and failing to lift the thing, he decided he would stop back for it later if he couldn't find anything else. Towards the end of his 4 hours, he came upon the red and gold masterpiece. It was sitting outside a rambling 2-story Victorian house that looked like the Crypt Museum. Arthur figured they must have been cleaning out the space because there were rows of carpet and rusty sinks and old light fixtures and lots of other trash piled by the curb. But what caught his eye was the big chair sitting on top of the Hufford pile. Huffazard pile. Whoa! A throne, was his first thought. Now, I would like you to get ready for the description of the chair, and after that, I would like you to pause and write down, okay? Or write down what the chair looked like. The chair was covered in red velvet fabric that was stained and worn in a lot of places. But you could tell it had probably been an expensive chair once. Its heavy wooden arms and wide back were carved with swirls and decorations that had been painted in thick layers of metallic gold. One of the front legs was missing, and a lot of the paint was flaking. But if you squinted, it could definitely be a throne. Without a doubt, Arthur knew this was the chair Mr. Hampton wanted. The trick was how to get the thing onto the cart. It took him forever to figure out how to lift and balance it on the top of the cart, and then he spent more than an hour slowly pushing it back to the garage. As he was crossing one street, a guy in a pickup truck offered Arthur $10 for the thing. "I'll take it off your hands," he said. Arthur shook his head and kept going. So now I would like you to pause and write that down. That even though somebody offered money to get the chair, he said no, he refused. 2 other people stopped to ask if he needed help. One car full of high school jerks honked and yelled stuff at him. Arthur resisted the urge to make a rude gesture. He just kept staring straight ahead, pretending he'd seen nothing. When he finally got back to the garage, he left the chair sitting right next to the side door so Hampton wouldn't miss it. He put the sign that said, "Arthur, find the throne chair," in the middle of the red velvet seat, as if to emphasize that this was it. He had found the perfect one. He couldn't wait to see what James Hampton thought of it. Chapter 26. On the following Saturday, February 8th, it was raining. A steady cold rain, and there were no messages from Mr. Hampton when Arthur arrived, which was odd. Arthur was so sure he had found the perfect chair, the perfect throne for Mr. Hampton, that he was kind of disappointed the guy hadn't left a single word to thank him. A little note would have been nice, especially after all the hassle he had gone through to haul the chair back to the garage. He thought he should have gotten a few hours deducted from his probation just for that. Strangely, the shopping cart was missing too. Arthur walked around outside, carefully stepping over the piles of old concrete blocks and junk, looking for the cart. He wasn't sure what to do. Mr. Hampton had never forgotten to leave him an assignment before, no matter what the weather was. He'd collected junk for the guy in a lot worse weather than this. On his second walk around the building, Arthur happened to notice that the side door of the garage was slightly open, just a small crack. That was strange, he thought. It had never been opened before. Had Mr. Hampton forgotten to lock it? Or did the open door mean he was supposed to go in? Something about the open door made him nervous. There was no sign of anyone else around. He couldn't see any lights on inside. He couldn't hear anyone working. He glanced toward Groovy Jim's shop, wondering if he should go and ask him for help. But Groovy Jim had a customer, a rare occurrence, and he didn't want to bother him. Plus, he thought it would sound like a little crazy if he interrupted someone's tattoos to say he was jumpy about a missing shopping cart and an open door. It was 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning, not midnight, for creepy sake. Arthur decided he would knock on the side door and call out for Mr. Hampton. If the guy wasn't there or didn't answer, he would go home and let Officer Billy know that nobody had been around. He hoped he'd still get credit for his 4 hours and hadn't slogged around in the pouring rain for nothing. Taking a deep breath, Arthur rapped his knuckles on the door frame and shouted through the dark opening, "Hey, Mr. Hampton, it's Arthur Owens out here. It's Saturday. Can I help you with anything today?" He knew it sounded really dumb, but he didn't know what else to say. It was how his mom always answered the phone at the dentist's office when he called her. "Hello, this is Linda at Dr. Trickle's office. Can I help you with anything today?" Honestly, he wasn't expecting a reply to his question, but right after he said, "Can I help you with anything today?" there was a noise inside the garage. It sounded as if a can or something metallic had suddenly hit the floor. Arthur backed away from the door. He could feel his heart speed up. Was there something in there? He glanced around for an object to use as a weapon if he needed. A plank of wood with a couple of rusty nails sticking out of it lay on the ground nearby. He picked it up gingerly and used it to push the door open a little while wider, thinking maybe whatever was inside would come running out. Nothing did. There was an old paint can lid next to his feet, he noticed. Just to see what would happen, he picked it up and tossed it into the darkness. He could hear the lid rolling and spinning across what must have been a cement floor. Again, nothing. Arthur took another deep breath, telling himself he was 13 years old and should have more guts. He had survived 3 weeks of juvie with Slash. He had gone up against half of the varsity's football team team at his school to rescue Squeak from the trash can. It was ridiculous to be scared of a garage in the middle of the day. Still holding the piece of nail-studded wood, Arthur eased cautiously through the doorway. His wet shoes squelched on the cement, which was the only sound, other than his heart pounding in his ears, he could hear at first. Silently, he searched along the side of the door frame for a light switch. He was sure there must be one nearby, especially if Mr. Hampton worked there late at night, which Groovy Jim said he did sometimes. The old guy wouldn't wander around blindly in the dark. Arthur's fingers finally found the switch next to the door. Instinctively, he squinted before pushing the switch upward, as if expecting it to be painfully bright, like suddenly going from dark room into the blazing sunlight. But he definitely wasn't prepared for the dazzling vision that awaited for him. Now, what do you think will happen?